ICQ Podcast, episode 403, KISS Technology. Well, hello and welcome, fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, to this, our 403rd episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported this episode by our monthly and subscription donors. In this episode, we join Martin M1MRB, Dan KB6 Uniform, Caryn KD2 Golf Uniform Tango, Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BRY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is KISS Technology. Well, as always, we like to thank our supporters who kindly, help us pay our way, invest into our project, and generally speaking, help us to do the things we do. And this episode, we'd like to pass on our thanks to our monthly and subscription donors. They provide a fantastic base to us to allow us to, pay for things like the digital talk group and our hosting costs, etc. We would like you to consider if you found value from our projects and our show today. And if you have, please go to icqpodcast.com/donate, where anything that you send our way, goes towards your ICQ podcast and keeps us, advert free and producing your content for you every fortnight. So we'd ask you to consider us, if you found this show valuable to you. Right, well, now we're going to continue on with our show, where we join Martin, Dan, Caryn, Edmund and Ed to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur radio news, including legislating a bandwidth rate and the ARRL increases are coming. As always, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to this episode, the ICQ Podcast, episode 403, and tonight's news roundtable for that episode. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Hello, Martin. Good evening.
Good evening. And hopefully you haven't got too early a start off to Dayton tomorrow morning, but so I'll try not to keep you up too late.
No worries about that.
That's good. That's good. Also, we got Caryn Eve Murray KD2GUT. Hi, Caryn.
Hello, Martin. Good to be here as always.
Yeah, great to have you. And I got halfway through that and thought, did I do your call sign right? And I think I did. So yeah. In the UK, Mr. Edmund Spicer, sorry, not MM, are you? But you're probably MR0 MMG at the moment, aren't you, Edmund?
Yes, I am, all the way through till the end of June. Hello, Martin. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, hi, Edmund. Good to have you. And over in Germany, where we'll be bugging you in about a month's time, Ed, is Ed Durrant, DD5LP.
Yeah, good evening, Martin. Good evening, everybody. And yeah, you're quite right. The Friedrichshafen ham radio is just over a month away, and they've got all their programme up on the website as of, I think, yesterday. So things are rolling along. Looking forward to it.
Very good. That's good. That's good. Right, let's get our first one underway. Congresswoman has reintroduced a bill to replace the symbol rate limit to a bandwidth limit. Now, this one comes up fairly regularly. Dan, I know we've discussed this before. Do you want to go first?
Sure. So, yeah, we did discuss this last December, I think, when she first introduced it. And at that time, we sort of said, well, these things happen right at the end of a congressional term, and maybe this isn't going to really go anywhere. But I think the news here is that she has reintroduced the bill, and that means she's more serious about it, and that's a good thing. So let's keep our fingers crossed that we get some action this time.
Yeah, I hope so. Well, as I say, at the moment, looking at this, the HF digital symbol rate limit is got to be fitted within 2.8 kilohertz. Is that? Well, that's pretty much a SSB sort of a bandwidth. So I can't see it creating too many problems there. Caryn, what's your thoughts?
I think this was not unexpected. Anybody introducing a bill, any kind of bill at the end of the year for Congress, there's likely to be very little action only because of the holidays and the end of the year coming. I believe her introduction of the bill in December, of course, that was not by accident. I don't think she was expecting it to leave committee and get a full vote in a hurry. But I think she was putting her fellow lawmakers on notice, saying, hey, guys, this is a priority. We would like some action on this. Read it, because you're going to see it again next year. And she's made good on that. And it should be noted, this Congresswoman, Debbie Lesko of Arizona, is carving out an identity for herself as an amateur radio advocate. She is not a ham. I don't think she has any interest in becoming a ham, but she's been showing up at ham fests. Last year, I think it was last year, she proclaimed one day in April as Amateur Radio Day. So she really is getting cozy with the amateur radio community and really creating an identity for herself as an advocate. Hey, we need all the help we can get. So let's see where this goes.
Yeah, well, say there's nearly a million amateurs in the States. Yeah, I think it's a good thing we got somebody banging the drum for us. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Well, just give a bit of background on this. I don't know. I thought Dan might jump in, but in most of the world, what is now being proposed in this bill is already in place. It's the way that the transmission speed, the transmission bandwidth of data sent over an amateur radio signal is measured. And the current method in the US is the equivalent of, saying, 1200 baud. Remember the old, very, very old modems that used the telephone lines? That's the kind of speed that US amateurs are limited to. When there is an emergency, they have to go to the FCC and say, can you please give us permission to run a higher speed? It'll go over the current regulations, but we need it because we need to get the information across securely and quickly. And, I think partially that's also what's driving this Congresswoman who says, why do they have to always stop before they can start helping? Because of a silly regulation that's out of date and not in use anywhere else in the world. Oh, I don't know about that. It might be in use someplace in the world, but most places go for, as you've mentioned, the SSB bandwidth. And then as long as you don't spread outside of that, you're not going to cause anybody any problems. You can use whatever method you can to get the best speed and the most reliable signal over the air on HF, VHF, or wherever. So good luck to her. Hopefully it'll get passed and come in. It's long, long, long overdue. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, as you say, it's a long overdue. And yeah, Ed, I'm old enough to remember 300 baud modems and even an acoustic coupler where you put your phone handset into the cradle. God, that takes me back years. But yeah, we've got to move forward. Edmund, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, the same thought crossed my mind as crossed Caryn's mind. I recognise this lady's name from previous news stories, and she's clearly somebody who advocates ham radio activities. So my thought was, is she licensed? So I've done a cursory search, and it is only a very cursory search on the internet, and as far as I can see, she's not actually licensed herself, but all power to her elbow in terms of supporting amateur radio. And I've never done anything on HF involving a symbol rate. In fact, if I ever see the phrase symbol rate, the first thing that pops into my mind is digital broadcast transmissions from geostationary satellites at 10 gigahertz, which I used to be quite involved with receiving years and years ago before I discovered amateur radio. So I've no direct experience of that, but Ed's explained that it's largely an obsolete thing from years gone by, so fingers crossed that she'll be successful in her push for having this removed, Martin.
Yeah, as I say, hopefully it will bring the states into line, make things a lot more sensible for everybody. And yes, as Ed said, if you have to request to go outside the current regulations, and you've got to get a notice of variation every time in an emergency situation. Does seem a bit silly, really, quite honestly. So let's hope they get that one sorted.
Can I just make one quick comment here?
Of course you can, Dan.
Sure. So I'd just like to encourage all the U.S. listeners to contact their congressional representatives and get behind the bill. You know, the way these things work is they can get multiple sponsors, and you know, if you have a congressperson that you know, especially if you know them well, tell them to co-sponsor the bill with Ms. Lesko.
Yeah, that can't hurt either, because it can certainly work for both lady and themselves by joining together and working on this one. So that's good news. Right, moving to our next news story. Get ready for another ARRL dues increase. Now, I'm going to go back to Dan first on this one, because I lifted this off your website, Dan. But there ain't many things that aren't going up this year, are there?
Well, no, and you know, this will. I'm sure this will. Not my blog post, but the dues increase will generate a lot of comment and opinion here in the U.S. But as I say in the blog post, you know, things go up, so we got to, you know, we'll end up paying more. You know, pay as far as the ARRL is concerned, paper costs more, new employees cost more, everything costs more. So a dues increase is probably warranted. The question I had, though, in the piece is that I'm not sure the ARRL is going about this the right way. For example, they're having a survey on whether or not they should raise the dues and by how much, but they're limiting it to current members. Well, current members probably are okay with especially a modest dues increase. But what I think they should be doing is surveying the other folks who aren't members and saying, well, why aren't you a member? You know, there's that kind of thing. So I don't know. That's my point of view on it. I think rather than trying to expand membership, which is what I think they should do, they're sort of, I don't know, circling the wagons, if you will, and not reaching out. And I think that's the problem here.
Yeah, interesting point, Dan, because I suppose if you could double your membership, you wouldn't double your costs. So technically, by doubling your membership, you could actually reduce your membership cost potentially to cover, because I'm sure the ARRL must be a not-for-profit, isn't it, Dan?
Oh yeah, sure. And not only could you maybe reduce the dues, say you just kept them at that level, well then you could do more. You could do more spectrum advocacy. You could do more outreach to STEAM project programs. You could do more, and rather than saying, "Oh, costs are going up, we're going to have to start doing less," we should think about how we can do more.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. Interesting one. Caryn, I'm going to go to you second again, because this is a US story. What do you think on this one?
Okay, a few thoughts here regarding the spectrum advocacy and other issues. I know the ARRL, when it sends its mailing to renew your dues, always solicits as well for things like spectrum advocacy, or sometimes, if I remember correctly, sometimes I will get a separate mailing to that effect. Folding it into the dues might be a little more elegant way to cover those needs. But my other thought is this: just as there was a big survey about imposing the licensing costs with reduction, and I do forget the numbers for younger hams. If the ARRL is trying to grow a younger membership, I'm thinking they need to make an allowance for younger people who may be students, and not impose this kind of increase across the board. It's a given. They are going to they're going to raise the dues. That's it. That's life. As we noted before, nothing is going down or even staying the same, really. But they have made that decision. It would be super to follow Dan's suggestion and really send this out to the general ham population. My experience, and it's by no means a scholarly study, it's just been anecdotal from my end. Most people who I know who are not in the ARRL have made a conscious decision not to join the ARRL. And so while I would like to know how they would feel about a dues increase, I don't know that this is going to compel them anymore to join or not to join. But gee, I sure would like to see younger members accommodated in the area of dues. And if that means kicking the dues up a little higher for the rest of us, so be it. I think we need to support the younger folks. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems at all. Well, I think a lot of clubs and I think it's done in some places where if you're a student and you're in full-time education or whatever, you get a student rate, which is pretty thing. Edmund, it's a good job I ain't got Martin Ruffle here because he'd be foaming at the mouth regarding the cost. I mean, in fairness, $49 is probably about £45 a year to us. I'm sure the RSGB membership is higher than that, and I'm sure we've had increases recently, haven't we?
I believe it was higher, and the increase was £9 extra per year. So an extra 75 pence per month, or for the ARRL equivalent, an extra 75 cents a month. I cannot genuinely believe that an extra 75 cents a month would push somebody from being solvent into hardship. I'm always a bit wary about offering concessions to people, whether it be students or retired people or what have you, because as the minute you make a concession for one group of people, you open the door to other groups of people believing that they ought to have the concession as well because they believe themselves to be a special case. From the job that I do, I know from experience that there are an awful lot of people out there who think that whatever their circumstances are, they are a special case. So if you once introduced a discount for students, you would have all the whataboutists present themselves and say, well, yes, but what about me? I'm a poor pensioner. I deserve a discount. What about me? I'm long-term unemployed. I deserve a discount, and so on and so forth. Beyond that, yes, it's obviously good the more members that you've got. I would rather have a lot more members paying less than fewer members paying more. And if are the ARRL actually asking the question, do you think we should increase our membership fees? Because if they ask that exact question, that's a rather strange question to ask, because most people, if you say to them, do you want to pay what you're paying now or do you want to pay more, would probably turn around and say, well, I'd like to pay the lower rate, wouldn't they? Or have I misunderstood?
No, that is the actual question. That is a part of the actual question.
Okay, that's interesting.
I think that, in fairness, as you say, this is quite a low increase per month. And we all have to work out the cost-benefit analysis on lots of things in life. You know, what I benefit, what I think is worth spending money on and may not be the same as you. But you just have to go there. I mean, I remember the guys at Silent Key now. I went round to see him at his house. It was on our committee. And I walked into his shack. He took me into the shack and then got very embarrassed because he just bought himself, at the time, it was about 10 years ago, the big Icon rig that was about £6,500. And he's like, oh, I bet you're going to give me a grief for spending that sort of money. And I went, no, that's your money. You do what you want with it. I said, nicely. Now, there's nothing against the radio, because it's a good radio, but I wouldn't buy one if I won the European lottery and had millions. That's because it's not what I want to do in the hobby. So, in fairness, it's a cost-benefit analysis thing, and as you say, very few pennies. Ed, I've waffled on a bit. What do you think?
Well, first point is what you said to start with is, although you've put this forward as an American story, it's not. I'm a member of the ARRL, and I believe you are as well, Martin. So it's actually a story about the members and getting new members. And over to you, Dan. Just a question: since the heading of this is they put the price up again, what was the last time that when was the last time they put the price up?
2016. So it's been a while.
Yeah, it's nearly, well, what's that now? 7 years. Yeah, 7 or 8 years without putting a price up, considering the inflation rate across the world. I think that's not unreasonable to look to put it up, and they're only looking to put it up a little bit. I guess a better question for the survey, and as you said, the survey should go out to all amateurs that might want to become members as well as the existing members, and should really be, if we reach, we need to put the price up, but if we put the price down, would you join if you're not a member? And then you can do the mathematics, because yes, it would be nicer to either put the price down and get a lot more members, or keep it at the same rate and try and get more members. Putting it up, you are going to get less new members. Unfortunately, that's just the way people think. But, I think it's reasonable. It sounds to me like it's less than the inflation rate. So I come back to, I think, what Edmund was asking. Why on earth are they asking? They should just do it and that's it.
Yeah, the question as you phrased it, the second half of the way you phrased it, Ed, is more to the point, I think, because logically, if a person is not a member of the ARRL at the current lower price, they can't sensibly turn round and say, well, raising the price higher still is the only thing that's putting me off joining.
Yeah, that's illogical. Yeah, I agree.
Well, unless they turn around and say, hey, look, we're going to raise it $5 a year or $10 a year, but we're then also going to start giving you some extra benefits. That's, I guess that's what I'm getting at here is that rather than, I mean, it's almost a defeatist attitude, right? Oh, we're going to raise the rates. Oh, yeah, we know we're going to lose some members, but let's not think like that,
I'll be interested in this. It's a shame Frank's not on with us, because he'd be the guru on this. But statistically, how many members do you actually lose when you raise the rates at less than the rate of inflation, which I think is what they're doing? So, or at the rate of inflation, whichever. I suspect they will not lose more members than they would have lost anyway.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
through death and illness and people leaving the hobby.
Well, there's also another option here, and that would be if they do raise the rates as they're expected to do, for those who wish to join, sweeten the deal a little bit and give them an introductory rate just for that first year, and let them sample at a lower risk what they're getting for their money.
But don't they, when somebody joins new, don't they, if you take the full one, not just the digital one, which I do, of course, because I'm outside of the country, but don't they actually get a free book or a free cup or something or other?
You do. You do get a premium, yeah. You get something.
Little gift.
Yeah, which is nice. I think that's helpful, but I think also having a lower rate, this way they're not committing to a high rate for that first year, so they can just see as well whether these services are going to be useful to them and whether they actually enjoy being a member.
But you've also got to be a little bit careful with that as well, because a few years ago now, the RSGB had an offer like that, where if somebody was brand new to the hobby and was joining the society for the first time, they were able to have their first year and 12 issues of Radcom for a very competitive low price, and long term existing members who had just renewed their subscription at the usual going rate then turned round and complained en masse about how unfair that was and how could it be right that these newcomers were getting this really good financial deal, whereas these long-term members who had been, paying into the society for years and decades between them were being rewarded, quote unquote, for having to pay the usual higher price. So it's difficult, isn't it? You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, I think we could argue for ages on this one, and I think it's hit a nerve. So that's a good one. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. It's only a small increase they're proposing in the real world terms, and it comes down in my books to cost benefit analysis. If you think you get benefit from the ARRL, then you'll continue to be a member.
I'll just encourage all ARRL members to go and take the survey if they haven't, even though the survey is kind of flawed. You can go to ARRL.org/take-dues-survey.
There you go, Dan. So, good one. Right, moving on to our next news story. And we hear a lot of information from India these days because it seems to be somewhere where ham radio is quite active. But Indian Amateurs Reunite Family after nearly 10 years. Caryn, you put this one in, though we discussed it earlier. Would you like to go first?
Yes, thank you, Martin. In India, where there is not the best infrastructure, and in some cases no infrastructure, ham radio is everywhere and really stands in for formal infrastructure. The folks at the West Bengal Radio Club, where we have written about extensively on Newsline, seem to have a subspecialty. In addition to responding to natural disasters, earthquakes, monsoons, and all of that, when there's a personal crisis, they also step in, and they have developed a real expertise in tracking down families for people who are lost or abandoned. And this was the case here with a 24-year-old woman who apparently had been given away in marriage to somebody 10 years earlier. At the tender age of 14, her uncle took her from the family home at her father's request because he could not afford to support all the kids in the family. And so she was married off. And all these years living in a state in India, not her native state, but pretty far away, she missed her family and finally got around to being able to contact the authorities, actually a women's group. She did this with the knowledge and support of her husband, according to the news reports that I saw. So this wasn't like she was trying to run out on him. But she did miss her family and most particularly her mother. So the police got in touch with the West Bengal Radio Club. Hams are usually pretty well networked, and this club is amazingly networked with hams in many states throughout India. And so they worked their connections and managed to find the family. And they were, of course, delighted to be able to reconnect with her. And that presumably that reunion has taken place now. I think they contacted her brother, who helped facilitate the reunion. What a great way to use amateur radio for such personal things, as well as the big things that usually grab the headlines. And as I say, this club has a tremendous specialty in doing that. This is not an isolated incident. We get stories from them all the time. They've also assisted in thwarting an attempt to sell one woman into a human trafficking ring. So they're pretty remarkable, and they were chosen twice now for the Amateur Radio Newsline International Newsmaker of the Year Award. So hats off to them. West Bengal Radio Club. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, as I say, good news from them. And it is fair. Us amateurs, we are very communicative. And do you meet people? I'm sure everybody here can tell you exactly the same story as me. You start chatting to somebody, and they know somebody you know, and then that person knows somebody else. We have quite a strong networking, and when you want to find things out or get things done, hams have quite a strong social network. So I can understand why it went well for them. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Well, I was going to bring up the point that Karen actually covered. This West Bengal radio club has been the winner of the Amateur Radio Newsline International Newsmaker Award 2 years for in 2 different years, and it was based on all the community work that they do, which obviously portrays a very good picture of amateur radio to the general public, and it gets published in national papers and on national radio and so on. But it seems to just echo to me what we have, as you're saying, Martin, in the fact that we have a community and a linked community, and as you said, a social presence that we can use for things like this when it's needed. And in the fact that India has a complex situation over there, I won't say they're a third world country. They aren't anymore. They've grown up and become more of an industrial nation, but unfortunately, the social side or the caring for the people side has perhaps not grown with the expansion in other areas. And the result is that indeed even the police are simply unable to help, and this is where amateur radio comes in, and it's really an echoing of volunteering as much as anything to do with any communication. And I think that's really great. And yeah, this case, the woman was away from home for 10 years. I believe she's 24 now, and she was sold into the other marriage at 14. So it's great that she gets back together. I mean, that's one case. I guess there's hundreds of cases like that in India. And when amateur radio can help to bring a family back together, it's great that they do. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, agree with you 100% there, Ed. Edmund, what's your thoughts on this one?
There's nothing I can add, really, other than that I was wondering if they used amateur radio directly in some way, shape or form to make this happen, or if it's more a case of amateur radio being the hobby in common that brought all these people together in the club, but beyond that, amateur radio was kind of coincidental to actually doing this good act. But either way, it's a good news story, isn't it? And it's always good when radio amateurs can do good works in public service, irrespective of whether they're actually using amateur radio at the time, I guess.
Yeah, it certainly is. And yeah, I would suggest, as I said earlier, we tend to know people who know people who know people who know people. And, you get on the air and you ask all sorts of questions of the people, and, you put things out there. We have a network that works, I would suggest. But there you go. Dan, what's your thoughts? Have I left anything else to say?
Well, really not much, but I'll just say that I'm always amazed when I read these stories because, it's just something that doesn't come up here. And, really kudos to this club in India for doing this work. This it's obviously a real service. So that's just wonderful.
Yeah, certainly is on that one. Right. Another ARRL story, but this time ARRL are offering assistance to hams for RF compliance. Now, we've had to do this in the UK. Ed, you told us the Germans have to do this. Do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, I can do. The regulations around the world about non-ionizing radiation as is emitted by radio transmitters and the distance that people are allowed to be to the antenna when a transmitter is working is defined in international standards, international regulations. And for a long time, amateur radio, because we run relatively low power, was excluded from this. However, whether it was for political reasons, with people afraid of 5G, etc., or whether it was something that they just said, no, we can't have any exclusions, we need everybody to do this. That basically the case in every country that I own, that I have a call sign from, a license in. So in Australia, in Germany, and in the UK, you need to do an inspection of your station, initial, and then if you ever change anything in the way of different power levels, different antennas, to make sure that you are protecting the general public, to keep them far enough away from your antenna systems. It also applies when you're operating portable, of course, as well, like under SOTA or POTA. You also need to take this into account. The history in the US is like it was in the other countries I've mentioned, that previously amateur radio was excluded, but now it's included. They were told 3 years ago that you're going to have to do this, and it was like a week or 2 weeks ago that the temporary exclusion ran out, and now all US amateurs have to be able to provide that information, whether the information is gathered mathematically using a spreadsheet, or whether it's done using measurement instruments, measuring RF field strengths. Both, I believe, are acceptable. Obviously, the simpler one is the calculation. And that's what I believe the ARRL are helping with, that the RSGB has helped with, the WIA has helped with, the DARC have helped with. And I believe in all of these cases, it's not just members only, it's any amateurs in these countries are allowed access to the tools to do the evaluation. So we all have to do it. I don't think there's anybody wants to kick up a fuss about it. It makes sense. It's a good justification to put that antenna, HF antenna, another 10 meters higher than you planned, and the planning commission said you could. Well, now you've got to say, well, emissions wise, I'll need to raise it another 10 meters. I wonder if that'll work with the planning managers in the local towns and villages. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, good point you raised, and the station managers as well. Yeah, I can understand that. Well, we all have to do it. Dan, you seem to mention that this was muted a couple of years ago, and now everybody's starting to get a move on to try and get this done.
Well, yeah. So, as Ed mentioned, this new rule was really set in place 2 years ago, but stations who had previously had it's legal wording sometimes escapes me, but stations who had previously sort of had done the calculations, or I don't know, I somehow most stations got an extra 2 years. Those 2 years expired on May 3rd of this year. So now everybody really has to do this. So, but it's relatively simple to do, and if unless you're operating really, really high power and gain antennas, you're probably okay. And the simplest way to do it is to go to the ARRL website. That's sort of the thrust of this article, is to go to the ARRL website and punch in the numbers into their spreadsheet there, and then it'll tell you whether or not you're safe or not. And this is a good thing to do. I mean, it does seem like a pain to have to do it, but it is a good thing. We really don't want to be operating unsafely, and not only for us personally, but for your neighbors. If if your antennas are close to your neighbor's home, you want to be sure they're safe as well. So anyway, that's the story. Getting back to sort of the ARRL membership thing, if you were an ARRL member, you would have gotten an article in the May QST explaining all this, and with a link to the calculator. So anyway, this is something you should do. To sum it all up, this is something you should do to make sure you and your neighbors are safe, and it's not that hard. And if you don't have a huge superstation, you're probably okay.
Yeah, good news, Dan. Good news. Well, I'm going to ask Caryn what she thinks. And Caryn, I know you operate portable as well, so probably you're going to have to do some extra calculations. But I got a feeling you might be more worried about the wildlife and animals than you would neighbours. Am I right?
Martin, you know me well. Yes, I do worry about these guys, and so the work must get done very, very soon. I do not need my local wildlife to be in danger. My neighbors, we'll talk about that another time. No, I actually want everybody to be protected. I don't think this is that much of a hassle, and it is a very wise investment for sure. As Dan pointed out correctly, it is the information is in QST. Now, QST goes, of course, to ARRL members. However, you do not have to be a dues-paying member of the ARRL to have access, and you do not even have to have a web account with ARRL. Indeed, the information is available to you free. And if you're notified by QST about it, you also may have heard about it on the ICQ podcast. And I don't think we do not have paid subscriptions, right? And AR Newsline, we do not have paid subscriptions. Dan's blog, Dan, have you instituted pay? I don't think Dan has paid subscription. So it's free. It's free for everybody. And it's an important, very important public safety thing. As for portable, yep, I'm going to have to work on that as well. My portable antenna has stopped giving me grief. You'll hear more about that later. But I think we will be measuring and doing our diligence for sure. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I know I was half winding you up at the beginning of that one, but I know you do care about animals as well. So I thought it was important because some people won't think about it. Oh yeah, I'll put my aerial over here or my antenna over here, and maybe not think about the wildlife. So that's important as much as anything else. Edmund, any thoughts on this one?
No, nothing I can add. If I'd been born in the USA, to quote Bruce Springsteen, then I would definitely be an ARRL member, but seeing as I'm not. But the RSGB website has the equivalent thing, including the calculator where you can put in all your vital statistics, and that is also available worldwide to RSGB members and non-RSGB members alike if anybody wanted to have a look at that as well.
Yeah, certainly is. And I'm sure, as Ed has said, other national societies have their versions of it as well. So that's good news.
I thought you were going to say other national societies are available.
Oh, they are, if you wish. They'd be interesting to see. I've seen 3 UK variants of the spreadsheet, and they can be interesting and all work and help. I just need to get back on HF, really. In fairness, I haven't done much of it recently.
I hate to do this again,
Go
but
on.
can I just have one more comment?
Go
So
on.
I was just Googling around the ARRL website, and they also are making the section of the latest handbook on RF safety free for download. So if you want to read that section in the handbook, you just go to the right ARRL page and click a link, and it downloads the PDF for you. And it's the whole section on RF safety. So it's a real deep dive into this thing.
Certainly is. Well, I think you mentioned, Dan, and not going to hold too long on this, but it's anything from 10 milliwatts up, which rather worried me in the States because we're, I think, 10 watts and above when we have to do it. But I have known Mrs. B not be able to get into her car when by her button pushing device when one of my hotspots has been transmitting. So I've been in QSO with somebody and she can't get in the car, and I'm not talking. But
That's interesting, because some of these unlicensed devices can be 10 milliwatts, can't they? So do the people using unlicensed devices also have to do this calculation now?
Well, presumably the manufacturers would have done it.
Well, no, because how does it relate to the position where that particular thing is now? That button press or whatever for the garage door, they might be too close to their neighbours. The manufacturer can't know that.
Yeah, you're right. But I mean,
in other words, 10 milliwatts is silly. Is I think what we're all saying.
Well, yeah, right. I mean, basically everybody's got to do it.
Yeah, including the people that don't know anything about radio, i.e., the non-licensed people using the non-licensed equipment.
Well, again, I don't know exactly, but you would think that the manufacturers of said equipment would have some regulations to say, okay, at that power, so many feet away, they're going to make some assumptions about how many feet away. Yeah, if your neighbor stood underneath your garage door opener with his head up against it, I mean, all bets are off. But I'm saying they're making some basic assumptions on that.
Yeah, and of course your mobile phones emit more power than that as well.
Well, right, and that's a whole nother
and then
thing.
there you're putting it against somebody's head. Yeah,
right.
Well, the other one I was suddenly sitting here thinking is most handy talkies are at least 4 watts, amateur ones. And, there's no way I can be X meters away from my handy talkie when I'm using it. So I'm in the near field straight away.
But the regulations are always to protect other people, not you. You can radiate yourself all you like.
All right, then.
As the operator. And I think in some countries the family as well is not restricted by the regulations. It is purely the general public that has to be protected.
So if I radiate myself and end up with 3 heads, I can get a job in a circus then, can't I? I'll behave, sorry. Oh, let's move on.
But I tell you what, I don't think you have to worry about that.
Yeah. Let's move on before I get into lots of trouble on this one. Okay. From rag chew to riches. Are these nets worth it? Well, Karen, you put this one in, and I said I'm a rag chewer. I'm not very rich, and I've had some very long ones. And you said, what was my hourly rate? So over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Martin. Well, I was not I was not suggesting you now charge by the hour to participate in RagChew, though that's an interesting concept. People still love nets, and certainly the net that we highlighted this week in Amateur Radio Newsline has been around since 1957. Any of you listeners out there, have you been around since 1957? If you haven't, this net is older than you. It's thriving. It's called the Rooster Net. And these not only are devoted hams who love to rag chew with one another, they'll get up extra early to do so. I draw the line at 7:30. I do participate in a net at 7:30 a.m. and sometimes I'll let that go till 8 a.m. because I do like my sleep. It's important to keep in mind that as much as we have technology driving a lot of this hobby, at its very core, it's still about people, and it's about people connecting with people. And what I think is worth celebrating about this net is that these hams have kept alive the art of rag chew, which sometimes is forgotten in the pursuit of other things. So we wanted to just make note of the achievement of these people to really hold it together all this time and continue with the friendships, continue getting on the air with one another, and just to mark the occasion. So the riches in this case aren't monetary, but I think they're still pretty valuable. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, certainly are. And rag chew rag chewing, you get lots of information from people. You learn. It's an education thing, but it's thoroughly enjoyable. Very quickly, I've told the guys this. I was out with Chris at the weekend. I ended up operating his radio on 4 meters. I told him what it would be like. But what happens is on 4 meters, and I know you guys don't have it in the States, there are not a lot of operators on 4 meters. So when you get somebody on 4 meters, it's pretty much a half-hour chat minimum. I did an hour on Sunday afternoon when Chris was waiting to pack up and go home. So, sorry, Chris. But, yeah, rag chewing's great. Edmund, what's your thoughts?
Well, the very fact that it exists and continues to this day tells me that it is of value to the people who participate in it, because if it wasn't, it would have presumably fizzled out long ago. And the fact that it's a net with multiple participants rather than just two people talking to each other doesn't devalue it in terms of conversation. So, but the short one-word answer to is, does it have a value even in the 21st century, is yes. But 80 Meters is not a band that I'm overly familiar with, mainly because I've got huge levels of QRM on it, about 18 hours a day, and the 6 hours a day when I don't have QRM from the neighbours' switch mode power supplies and the like. Those hours tend to be during the middle of the day, just at exactly the same time that propagation on 80 meters is at its worst due to delayer absorption. So I know there are similar things in the UK, like is it the Pathfinder's net that starts at 4 in the morning and then the horizontal net that it morphs into a few hours later, but I've never heard these, as I say, because of all the interference. But yeah, these nets are obviously valuable because it's not just the rooster nets, there are others in other parts of the world, and long may it continue. We need to have people talking to each other, especially in the light of the well-documented loneliness that's going on a large scale in the wake of COVID-19, Martin.
Yeah, certainly do. And I think having a good chat about things, I've learnt a lot talking to a lot of amateurs, and I thoroughly enjoy hearing what they're up to and one thing and another. So I think that's great. I mean, that's one of the reasons I like our digital talk group. It's not the busiest in the world, but when conversations happen, they're good. So there you go. Dan, what's your thoughts?
Well, maybe we could start calling this the anti-FT8 net.
No, you can't do that, Dan. I've got into trouble for that once before. It was Bill calling it something else.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll just mention that I'm a member of this group called the CW Ops, and we actually keep track of our rag chewing QSOs on a monthly basis, and we publish it in our newsletter. And so we encourage people to rag chew on CW. And I'm happy to say that I've been scoring in the top 10 lately. So anyway, I'm just to say I'm a rag chewer myself and proud of it. Let's say that.
Yeah, that's good news. And I say nothing wrong with rag chewing, as you say. Great fun. And it's a way of us being sociable to each other, which is a lot about our hobby. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Well, lots been said that I was going to say as well, but just the title you put on this one, or has been put on this one, Rag Chewing to Riches. The riches are, of course, the friendships that are made that some of these people on this net we're talking about have been friends for 20, 30, 40 years or whatever, and it's through the net that they became friends. And I was also going to jump in, but you blew it for me, Martin, to say, where's the next best place to rag chew after 80 meters? Well, of course, it's the ICQ podcast digital talk group or room or whatever it's called in either Yaesu, Fusion, DMR, D-Star, etc. And yeah, I find that the occasional times that I get on there, it does end up rag chewing. I've got to actually say, if I think back who I've been, talking to for more than just an exchange over the last 6 months, it's been DX. Strangely enough, I had quite a nice talk to a gentleman on the Falkland Islands. I regularly have rag chews with a couple of amateurs in Australia. And I'm not boasting on this, I just picked the right time because I'm not using high power always. And also New Zealand. And there's one gentleman in New Zealand that when I see him spotted somewhere or I come across him on the band, I always wait in queue to have a talk to him because he's just nice to talk to. And, our hobby isn't limited by borders. And, to have a rag chew with somebody in another country you either do know from the past or you don't know, is quite something we can do that normal people can't do, so non-amateurs can't do. Yeah, some will say, well, you've got the smartphone, you can pick up and talk to somebody there. Yeah, who do you know? Are they going to be there? Are they wanting to talk to you for half an hour? In the case of amateur radio, the answer is usually yes. In the case of a telephone, the answer is no. So another advantage, and yeah, I can't imagine rag chewing on CW because I can't imagine ever making a QSO on CW. As we've talked about before, it's something that just doesn't float my boat. But also, the times I have tried to learn it, I haven't managed it. So I have a great respect for people who use CW, and especially for people who can rag chew on CW. That must be quite a thrill and a talent. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, certainly is. And like you, I'm not a CW person. I'm a failure to Dan, but he's accepted me still.
Oh, no.
Anyway, yeah, no problems. Well, let's say we all support rag chewing. And in many ways, we rag chew here with our discussion. So, yeah, it's good fun. Right, Edmund, I'm going to get you go next on this one because it's the only UK story we have. The RSGB supports International Women in Engineering Day. Now, that seems quite a strange one that I didn't even know this day was going to happen. But what do you think?
I think if you want to take part in this, you need to get your submission in quick because we publish this episode of the podcast on Sunday, the 21st of May, and the deadline for submissions is the following day, the Monday, so hopefully the date is inclusive. But more information is available on the RSGB website if you wanted to have a look, and if you know anybody who fits the bill for this, I would encourage you to nominate them.
Yeah, and many ways, there's a lot of ladies. If we exclude them from the hobby and we do the male chauvinist pig thing, unfortunately, we're going to miss out on a tremendous amount because, it's all about people's understanding, perception, ideas that makes us all that much better. And I'm glad that we're actually making a bigger thing of pulling girls and ladies into into engineering and this hobby. But there you go. Caryn, what's your thoughts on it?
Well, Martin, my thoughts are, where was this when I was younger? My life might have been very different. I come to ham radio from the non-technical side, and so the technical side is coming to me now very, very slowly and with a heavy reliance on my Elmers. Had that been different when I was younger, I think it might have made the transition a lot easier. So I applaud this. It's well overdue. When you think of many of the contributions women have made in history, particularly during the war effort during World War II, and certainly in the sciences and in medicine, wow. Yep, definitely a big thumbs up for this one. I'm very happy to have this.
Yeah, and I agree everything you said there. It's important, and we're living in different times, and unfortunately, I look back years and years ago when I left school, I was at school, and Martin Rothwell and I have had similar discussions about, God, I'd love to have done that when I was at school, or I'd love to have been involved with that. But, it's a different time. We have to grab what we can and, embrace other things as they come along, which is good. And I'm glad that now people are making more of an effort. Dan, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think this is a great idea, and maybe we over here can get the ARRL, push the ARRL to do a little bit more on this next year, because they're making some short steps into diversity and that kind of thing. So maybe we can get them to do something about this next year as well.
Well, maybe your Congress lady might take this up as a secondary thing, or add to what she's doing and make a thing of it, which could be useful.
Yep, that's another good suggestion.
Yeah. So, Ed, have we left you anything to say on this one?
Yeah, you've left me the question to ask, which is, what are the RSGB actually doing? The short story we've got does not have a reference to the story, and from reading the text we've got here, there is the International Women in Engineering Day in June. It's been going a few years, I guess, which is great and all the rest of it. And the RSGB are asking you, if you're a female or if you know somebody, to send in photo and a brief story about them to the comms team by the 22nd of May, as Edmund pointed out, the day after this podcast gets released. But what are they going to do with that information? Is this to go in the Radcom magazine? Is this going to be read out on the air? Is this going to be part of the GB2RS news bulletin of what women are doing in different places? Or are they arranging a day to bring a selection of these people to an actual event on the Women in Engineering Day? I'm left asking the question, what they say they support it. Yeah, great. But what are they actually doing?
Good question, Ed. The information we have did come direct from the RSGB. I picked it up and thought it was worth promoting it. But as you say, is this the RSGB running this event this day? Are they the people who set the day up? Or is it something else? You're right.
My guess would be it's something to go in Radcom, which is fine and it's good, but the story doesn't actually say that. Radcom being the magazine of the association, of course. Yeah, it's certainly worth looking into, and I was scurrying trying to find something on the RSGB website, but I haven't tracked that down yet. So maybe by the end of the show I'll have found something and I'll update everybody.
Yeah, well, as I say, this came from the RSGB, Ed, so you may not find anything else. But anyway, I think it's worth mentioning. Right, move to our last news story. Celebrating the power of QRP. The power of QRP. The low power of QRP. That probably ought to have been, but no problems at all. Ed, you haven't gone first for a while. Do you want to go first on this one?
Well, I can do. Of course, everything above 5 watts is QRO. You do realise that. So, real QRP starts at 1 watt. No, the actual definition of QRP is 5 watts CW, 10 watts sideband, 10 watts PEP sideband. Digital, I think, generally people say 5 watts or less, so 1 or 2 watts. Yeah, so the IARU Region 3, which is Asia Pacific, Australasia, they've been promoting QRP, and June the 17th, they've got a special day for it with, more QRP activities, field days, contests, kit building, and articles. So it's actually all coming out of Japan. Yuki JH1NBN, who's the secretary for IARU Region 3, been promoting. It's another one where I'm saying there's no reference, unfortunately, that I'm not sure an exact, but there's something happening on June the 17th in Region 3 for QRP operators. But more than that, I guess the IARU Region 3 website would be the best place to go and get more information, unless somebody's looked it up before in this group. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, I think what you find, Ed, is that if somebody says, we're going to do something on this day, then people go out and do something. And it's a bit like 2 meters sideband. It's probably not that busy in the London area.
It will be this weekend. It's the VHF contest, the UK.
I know, but when a contest or something like that happens, it's there because there are people doing it.
So they're putting a stake in the ground for June the 17th to be QRP Day in Region 3.
Very probably. And it means that all the QRP operators have a fairly good chance of working a few people instead of the odd one or two. Great news for QRP. Great for a hobby, I would suggest. So, yeah, that's where I think it's going, but I don't knock it because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I like the last line in the text, which says, operating QRP offers advantages concerning, among others, the reduction of QRM on the amateur bands. We're back to this question of how much power you run again, that your license says only run as much as you need to. And of course, if everybody obeyed their license, there would be less QRM, less overloading of receiver front ends, less splatter. But of course, people don't work that way.
No, I get what you're saying. And I'm going to throw the hand grenade in the room. Because I have done a fair amount of QRP operating, people used to say to me, Martin, life's too short for QRP. And I'd stand there.
Q Edmund. Edmund's got his own story on that.
Yeah, he probably has. And I'd look him in the face. I'd look him in the face and go, oh, yeah, well, QRO is like fishing in a pond with a stick of dynamite. You throw the stick in, you kill all the fish, they float to the surface, scoop them off. Where's the skill? They don't like that one. And I'm sorry if I've upset a lot of people, but it is. QRP is sometimes you need a bit more skill. Edmund, Ed says you've got something to say on that one.
I'm not sure what you've got in mind, Ed. Please do elaborate.
I remember you coming up with a quote that was the opposite of what Martin just suggested about life's too short for QRP. I remember you quoting something else on this programme a few months back.
Oh, what? Life's too long for QRO?
Correct, which is actually back from the Reverend Dobbs, I believe, originally.
Well, I don't know that. In a rather sort of flippant way, I just reversed the life's too short for QRP thing. But no, QRP is always a good idea because it also means you have fewer concerns on the EMC front and all these calculations that we have to do now to make sure that we're not frying Martin Butler and making him have 3 heads or anything like that. And
you mean reduced by 1?
Yeah, exactly. And lighter batteries and batteries that last longer and all that kind of stuff. So yes, QRP rules, absolutely. And the 17th of June is quite a good day to be on the air anyway, whether you're in Region 3 or elsewhere, because that is the first day of the first weekend of the 2 weekends for the International Museums weekends. So if you're out QRP, you might be able to get a few museum stations in the log. How about that?
Well, there you go. I knew you'd be up for that one, and I thought you'd be out and about. I've got a busy June. I might try and get out on that one as well, but we'll see how it goes. Caryn, is life too short for QRP?
Oh, no, it only seems that way. No, in fact, QRP, well, although I don't know that I'm against us hams having 3 heads because there's no one else on the bands. You can always rag chew with yourself. So you're always guaranteed a contact if you're a ham with 3 heads. I am slowly working my way into QRP. Now, I know a lot of portable people. Well, they're not portable people, but their operation is portable. Some of them will go out and do 100 watts. And I say to myself, what's the point of that? First of all, they have these gigundo batteries and they drain them quickly and they're doing 100 watts. I think portables should be done elegantly and with minimum resources. That's the nature of portable. I'm working my way in that direction. I started at 50. I'm now at 40. Next time I'm out, maybe I'll do 30. I'm getting plenty of contacts when the bands are cooperative. I'd like to also acknowledge all those people who invest their money. Well, some buy kits, they invest their time rather than their money, and they build QRP kits. And there are some really neat ones out there. I know a friend of mine just sent me a photo. He was so proud he did it in 4 days, and he's going to take it out on a POTA weekend, go camping with his QRP kit. And another friend went out and spent the big money on an Elecraft, which is just a beautiful little radio. But you see, whether you invest the time to build or whether you invest the money, it's very clear people love QRP. And what does QRP do? It challenges your skill, it challenges your abilities as an operator. Yes, you do need good band conditions, but I was present at a POTA activation where we were here in New York and someone worked deep into Europe on one watt. What a thrill! Do that on 100 watts, it's like, so what? But on 1 watt, it's a thrill. So no, life can actually seem longer if you do QRP, and better. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, you do have a big buzz when you work somebody QRP, especially if they're a QRO operator. And as I think I said earlier, well, when we were chatting earlier, I never tell the other station that I'm a QRP operator until I've got their signal report. And then you'd be surprised how they shuffle very quickly to try and give you a rubbish signal report after they've given you a good one, because their ego can't let them give you a good signal report for a QRP station. But hey, that's life. Dan, I'm sure you do a fair amount of QRP as well, don't you?
Yeah, I do some. When I do POTA's activations, I have a KX3 I use, and I mean, I'm always just amazed at what you can do with it. I think the folks that say life's too short for QRP just really have never tried it. And of course, the trick, in my mind anyway, is to have the proper antenna. Don't use a crummy antenna. Get all those 5 watts as much as you can anyway out into the air, and you'd be surprised what you can do with it.
Yeah, you're dead right. It's being efficient. Don't use an antenna tuner if possible. Tune your antenna to the right length, and don't waste power in a rubbish antenna with an antenna tuner. The other thing is have a decent microphone and set your audio gain up correctly. That certainly helps. So,
But yeah, I don't bother about that.
oh no, you got a lump of brass, haven't you? Go. Yeah, no, I know where you're coming from, Dan. But
But
yeah,
but you're right. But you're right about that too. I mean, because again, so getting that microphone gain set properly will get you more power out.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting to show. And the other thing is that a lot of people don't realise when you look at your power output on your power meter, most power meters show average. So they never actually, on voice, you look and say you're only putting 1 or 2 watts out because it's showing average. It doesn't show the peak. But yeah, if you can, bit of audio processing, maybe not too much because you don't want to distort and be horrible audio. You want to be clear and punchy audio without it distorting. Good audio is better than over-modulated rubbish. So anyway, I'm waffling on. So that's the last of our news stories, but great that there's a QRP day. Right, let's find out what the guys have been up to since the last time I spoke. Ladies first, Caryn, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Well, we take you now to the great outdoors, where I've been doing much of my activation, and it's been incredible because of I've finally made friends with my portable antenna, the Buddy Pole, which is getting me very decent results after a bit of wrestling with it. Wrestling with the counterpoise more than anything. But I have an antenna. My rig expert is helping me now with that. I'm going to do some experimenting with radials, and our very own Ed, DD5LP, has been guiding me long distance on how to go through some testing on radials to see if I can get some good results with that. So it's an exercise that I think will increase my appreciation for what the antenna can do. On the CW front, speaking of rag shoes, I've been helping some folks who were going for the Marathon Award, which is an award that a CW operator gets from Straight Key Century Club for doing 100 CW rag shoes that last at least an hour. Talk about hitting your head against a brick wall. For myself, I'm a fairly new CW operator, so this does not come easily to me, but I'm pushing myself to do this. When anybody asks, would I have the QSO with them, they're going for the award. I'm not. I'm just helping them. I make a point to say yes, because I think we both benefit from it. It helps me tremendously. So that's been kind of fun. Now I'm starting to seek people out. If they are interested in Ragchew, I will chase them down and answer their call. So I'm gaining more confidence in that regard. Focusing mainly just on portable, POTA, CW, and the good old buddy pole. And on a rainy day, still sticking the hamstick on the roof of the car, just so I can still get out there and get my CW action in POTA. It's a great season to be a ham. I'm really enjoying it so much now in this spring. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, the weather's starting to be nice, and the propagation's good. So, yeah, I can tell from your voice you're enjoying it, which is really, really good. Right, Dan, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
See there, I'm not going to be the only CW operator on this podcast. As far as what I've been doing, I'm in the throes of finishing off the next version of the General Class Study Guide. Just about done, and so in fact, I got an email here while we were recording this that somebody wants to know when it's going to be done. So if you're waiting for that, you won't have to wait too much longer. We did a maker fair here a couple of weeks ago, and that was a lot of fun. And we were talking about women in engineering before. Right before the fair closed, we had a high school student come over and start talking to us about 2.4 gigahertz antennas. And she was really knowledgeable about this subject. She was talking about how she used her nano VNA to characterize the antenna, and after telling us about all this for a while, we said, "Hey, you know what? We ought to get you to come and speak to our club and tell us all about your 2.4 gigahertz antenna." But she was very very smart and very impressive. Another thing I did was last week and a half, I took a trip to San Diego, and I took the train. The train takes a long time. It takes about 2.5 days. And I made a point to take an HT with me. And at several of the stops, I was able to actually get out of the train and make a contact on a local repeater. So I made a contact in Fullerton, California, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Chicago, Illinois. And that was kind of fun. So wasn't CW, it was 2 meter FM, but it was a lot of fun. So that's what I've been doing. Always something to do in ham radio, right?
Certainly is, and I quite fancy that as the train ride. That sounds like real fun. You can sit back and relax. I always find whenever you fly, it isn't the nicest experience. It's just a noisy tube for X hours you sit in, and both ends they treat you almost like a criminal as you're going through the airport. So I don't like the airports, but I do it, but I don't like it. So I know what you mean, Dan. Edmund, what have you been up to?
Well, the weekend before this episode goes out was the Mills on the Air weekend, and my local radio club activated High Salvington Windmill on the Sunday, and conditions on HF, all of the HF bands were absolutely terrible. I didn't look at a solar forecast before or after, but I can only assume there must have been a flare on the sun or something. Propagation was virtually non-existent. The bands were extremely noisy. We worked, I think, 8 stations altogether on HF, and a friend of mine who's been taking part in this event every year for probably the best part of 20 years said that it was the worst weekend propagation-wise that he could ever remember. However, the club, of its own accord, also brought along a 2-metre FM station. Nothing to do with me. I hadn't suggested it or encouraged it, but fortunately they did it, and it was that band that saved us. We had 24 simplex contacts, the furthest flung one being with a station who was on the border between Dorset and Devon, which is many tens of miles line of sight from where we were in West Sussex. And I know I've said it before, but even if you've got a band that's usually very quiet, it's always worth calling CQ, because the chap we spoke to down on the Devon-Dorset border, he said, 2 metres is really quiet most of the time and you never hear anybody, so it makes a nice change to hear somebody talking on the band. And I didn't say it, but I thought to myself, yes, and the only reason that you're hearing this activity is because we called CQ first. You know, if we'd sat there just listening to the band but not calling ourselves and been waiting and relying on somebody else to call first, we would probably have been sitting there listening to silence. So nothing breeds activity like activity. And if you're ever involved with a special event station, particularly if it's on high ground, like near a windmill, for example, it's really good to put a 2-metre station on as well, rather than relying on HF. Because even if HF isn't terrible, if you're on 2 metres as well, then people who live locally or semi-locally may very well be familiar with the location you're operating from, or be familiar with the event that you're attending there. So the QSO will be more meaningful and significant to them than it would be if you were talking to somebody hundreds of miles away who had never even visited your local area. And there's also a practical side of it. If it's a weekend, people might well be out shopping on a Saturday afternoon, for example, and any given radio amateur is more likely to have a VHF, UHF handy-talkie slipped in their shirt pocket than they are to have an HF transceiver and antenna on their person. So we were really lucky and it worked really well. We were using a collinear on top of a very tall pole, so we didn't have to worry too much about the exposure considerations. Height is definitely might on VHF, particularly if there aren't lift conditions. So that was that bit. The other really good bit was the RSGB is encouraging a number of activities to do with the coronation, and even though the coronation happened at the beginning of May, the activities run until the end of June. And one of the activities is a thing called Beacon Connect. Now, I'm not going to try to explain exactly what that is, but if anybody's interested, if you go to www.rsgb.org/coronation, on that page there is a link to the Beacon Connect site. So a reasonably newly licensed amateur, whose name is Rich Mike 7 Golf Echo Tango, he climbed up to the top of Chanctonbury Ring, which is a SOTA summit, and it's the highest point above sea level anywhere in the county of West Sussex, and there is a beacon up there. So he activated it as part of Beacon Connect, and I worked him from a handheld at High Salvington Mill, which wasn't a foregone conclusion, because even though the path was only about 3.5 miles, it is rather obstructed by hills, so we didn't really know how well it would work handheld to handheld, but it did work okay in the end. But we had a go at exchanging messages using something called Rattlegram, which the RSGB have mentioned a few times and seem to be quite keen to promote. Rattlegram is basically like APRS but on steroids, so you can send a message of up to 90 characters, and it's an app that you download to your phone. So you type your message into your phone as to what you want to send to the person at the other end, and then you hold your phone near to your handy talkie or fist mic and transmit the noise that it makes over your FM signal. I assume this wouldn't work with single sideband. I think it needs the bandwidth of FM. And the person who receives it at the other end, they hold their smartphone running the Rattlegram app near the loudspeaker of their handy talkie, and the microphone in their phone picks up the noise, and the message that you send appears on their screen. And it's quite good fun doing it. And me and Rich, we exchanged messages, which came out absolutely perfectly. First time, there were no missing or incorrect characters. And yes, it's a novelty, and yes, it's not going to change the world, but it was fun. It was fun. And that is quite possibly, unless anybody knows better, the first time that two stations in the UK have actually exchanged a Rattlegram message over the air as part of the Beacon Connect project. So that was quite a nice thing to do. If anybody knows of anybody else who succeeded in doing a similar thing, then I'd be very pleased to hear from them. But failing that, as far as I'm concerned, Rich, Mike 7 Golf Echo Tango, and yours truly claim the UK first. And last but not least, as part of the Beacon Connect project, I have got a call sign for the final week in June, which is Golf Bravo 23 Bravo Lima Hotel, Great Britain 23, Beacon, Littlehampton, and that coincides with a week off work for me, and I'm going to try to activate Littlehampton Beacon for the Beacon Connect project. However, because of where it is, the topography of the nearby area, and the busyness of the general public going past most of the time, it's probably going to be a QRP operation. Fancy that, bearing in mind the EMC rules and regulations these days. So I don't know how often I'll be able to get on the air. I don't know how much power I'll be able to run. It might be quite difficult to put up any half-decent antennas, but I will try my best to be on the HF band somewhere, whether that's SSB, QRS, CW, or even, dare I say it, FT8. Yes, I have had some contacts in that mode. One way or another, I will try to do something. And I'm sure I'll do a YouTube video, even if the whole thing ends up being a complete disaster. I'll still do a YouTube video because it's important to have things like that on YouTube so that you don't just have videos of everybody being successful all of the time, which can create a rather misleading impression. So whatever happens, good, bad or ugly, I'll do something. So that is it, Martin. A busy few weeks ahead.
Well, you're going to be a busy boy, and you have been a busy boy, so I'm glad you enjoyed yourself, and all's going well. Ed, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
Yeah. Okay, first of all, I've done some more research on the International Women in Engineering Day. It's the 23rd of June, and it's organised by the Women's Engineering Society. It's a UK society, and their event is on that day. They're having lots of different organisations and groups presenting about women in industry or in service. The RAF's involved. I presume it's all virtual. It has to be, obviously. And they've got involvement from Australia, US, UK, Europe. And I would guess from that what the RSGB are going to be is they're going to be one of those people. They're not on the list at the moment, but I guess they're going to be putting something together about women in amateur radio. So gets a bit of advertising of amateur radio into the women in engineering field. So that's just a follow-up on the earlier item there. As I said, I would check up on it. Yeah, what have I been doing? Well, I'm still waiting for spring over here. We've had storm warnings. We've got a frost warning for tomorrow morning. It's more like winter than spring here. So, of course, that restricts my portable operations. The couple of days we have had a possibility, I've actually gone and done some activations either on foot or on my bicycle to some local GMA, Global Mountain Awards summits that are about 4 or 5 kilometres away from home. So I've either walked there or ridden there and activated those summits using my new favourite radio, which is the G106 from Zygo. It's another Chinese radio, but it's so small and light. And with that, I've been putting together some very lightweight antennas that I can just literally throw up into the tree, or at least I throw a cord up into the tree and then pull them up with it. All working very, very well indeed. And yeah, that's like 5 watts. Yeah, maybe it's 6 watts on some bands, but it's around 5 watts QRP and works extremely well. Worked all around Europe. I haven't got any DX with that as yet. Tend to find that if I'm out portable and I'm trying for DX, I'll take the Zygo G90 to give me the 20 watts. Still not high power, but just a little bit more. And as we say, only use as much power as you actually need for the contact. Since I've been pretty well locked inside, I've been doing a lot of computer-based work for various books I'm editing and various other things and manuals. But apart from that, I've also been working on a new antenna. Now, there's a surprise. It'd be a surprise if Eddie didn't come on and say he's trying out a new antenna on ICQ podcast. This one's an interesting one. It's actually combining 2 inverted V antennas and switching the connections to them so that it can be steered or turned, if you like, but it doesn't physically turn, into 4 different directions. And one inverted V becomes the driven element, and the other inverted V becomes the director. And it's like 8 to 9 dBi gain. So it's a good bit better than just a dipole. But I'm having problems with the relay switching at the moment, so I may report back either that I've given up on that next time in a month's time, or that I've got it working and it's the best antenna since sliced bread. We'll see. Anyway, that's why I've been busy again operating a little bit, not so much from the main home station, but mainly because the antennas are unplugged because of the storms. But when I can get out on a nice day, out portable. And that's actually what I plan to do on Friday this week, because hopefully the rains will have stopped by then and we might actually have a sunny weekend coming up. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've been busy, Ed. So, now you're having fun. So, but sorry, I'm hearing about the weather. Well, what have I been up to? Well, I mentioned last podcast that I was playing with the Sota Beams filter. I've now fitted that into a box with a little baby audio amplifier. You can get these little LM386 boards off the internet. You can buy the PCB, the whole unit, which is about half an inch wide by about 2 inches long. You can buy that for like under $2 in the States, I would suggest. They're about $1.60 in the UK, £1.60 in the UK. You can't buy the LM386 for much less than that. And this is the whole board already built. Now, I'll be honest, I broke one. So I broke one and it ain't worth repairing. But basically, I think I put too much DC in the front end. But I've now got an isolated capacitor in what I was doing. But I made my Sota Beams filter up. It worked great on receive. I took it out Sunday with us, and RF's getting into it, so I'm going to have to put some ferrites on the cable, and hopefully that will kill the problem. If it doesn't, we're back to the drawing board. Also made a little LED tester, and I'll talk more about that another day, but suddenly became aware that I needed to test a load of LEDs, and I couldn't do it with a multimeter, so because you haven't got enough voltage at the terminals to get it to light the LED. And was out the weekend with Chris. We did do some HF in his camper van. And as I was saying to the guys, we also did some 4 meters, of which I had a great contact with a gentleman on 4 meters. Locally, I have done 4, 2, 70 and 23 SEMs and some chats on the talk group. So, I watched the talk group, and in fairness, I still see people blipping it, and they tell me they have to blip it to make sure they're connected. But then they blip it and they don't say anything. So, in fairness, if you've blipped it, and I check the logs every now and again, I come in and I think there's obviously more people listening than actually talking. And what Edmund was saying, if you don't put a call through, we don't know you're there, so we don't go back to you. So if you put a call through, you're more likely to get an answer. Now, I watched, I didn't watch, but I saw after the event a station running DMR in Western Australia talking to a station in India running Yaesu Fusion. So the whole system works. It's just down for you guys if you want to use it. So there you go. Anyway, enough of me whittering about that. So that's what I've been up to. More playing with electronics in some ways and building this filter box and one thing and another. And if it works great, it'll be in use most of the summer, I think, when I'm out and about. So that's what I've been up to. So it's all left for me to do is to thank the guys for turning up tonight. I think it's been a good one. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU.
You're certainly welcome, Martin.
Well, it's great to have you as always. And listen, have a safe trip down to Dayton tomorrow. And hope all goes well for you there.
Thanks. I'll have a report for in the next episode.
That'll be good. And it'll be good to know what you got up to down there. I'd like to thank Caryn KD2GUT. Thanks for joining us, Caryn.
Oh, it's always a great time, Martin. It's always good being here with you guys. Have a great week ahead.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Caryn. I'd like to thank Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MMG.
Thanks for having me on, Martin.
Yeah, no problems, Edmund. And last but not least, Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP.
Yeah, I'll jump in and wish Dan a safe trip down to Xenia as well, and look forward to hearing everything he finds down there. And yeah, as Martin says, who knows, we might get the ICQ podcast team over there again at some point. So thanks for inviting me, Martin, and to everybody, have a great week, and we'll talk again in about a month's time.
We will. So all left for me to do is say 73s, guys, and we'll continue with the podcast. 73.
73.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
It's time to have a look at the news in brief from me, Colin M6BRY. We start off with news that the ICQ Podcast Digital Group has been granted access to use the GB23C call sign during its next Digital Talk Group Day, scheduled for the 3rd of June. The event will take place on 0800 UTC to 2800 UTC and is a great opportunity to talk to ICQ Podcast presenters and fellow listeners. You can find out more about the ICQ Podcast Digital Group by visiting digitalgroup.icqpodcast.com. The RSGB has announced its team for the YOTA event in Hungary. They'll be representing the UK, say at the Youngsters on the Air camp. It's hosted by the Hungarian Amateur Radio Society and will take place in Győr in Hungary between the 5th and the 12th of August. The team is made up of team leader Alexander 2E0 Foxtrot Mike Zulu, Henry James Mike 7 Hotel Juliet Roma, Hannah Mike 7 Yankee Quebec, and Jake Mike 7 Juliet November Sierra. So good luck to all involved. In device news, ICOM have announced the ID50E dual band D-Star digital handheld radio has been launched. So basically it's a potential device to look at if you're looking for something that is a dual bander between D-Star and FM dual modes, and looks very similar to the ID51E Plus model. So again, potentially an opportunity of an interesting radio to look at, and in particular if you're looking at the ICQ Podcast Digital Group, I say this will correspond through the D-Star protocol that our transponders work to mash together that wonderful network that we have available to you to use. So interesting stuff. And now, as is always, contact your favourite dealer of preference to find out pricing. Right now we move on to our features episode, which is KISS Technology. As always, hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Hi guys, for this episode I wanted to call it KISS Technology. Hopefully you know what KISS means. For those who don't, it stands for Keep It Simple Stupid. And in many ways, I think as we move forward in time, we're starting to get very, very complicated on what a lot of this gear does. And a lot of things we get these days, if it hasn't got a microprocessor and about 52 chips, we think it isn't any good. So, here's a few little tips. Some of the more senior members are probably going to go, Martin, are you really going to talk about this? But no, I am, because I think we forget about things. And in many ways, we just need to go back to basics sometimes. So for those who probably are a lot younger than me, some of these are pretty obvious, but you may not have thought about them. So just put it that way. Now, when I say KISS Technology, I think that one of the useful tools you can have is a continuity tester. Now, instantly at this moment in time, you're all looking at your digital multimeter going, I've got one of those. Why do I need one of those? Well, as I said, it's got a microprocessor in it. But often it's slow. So if you're looking for an intermittent short and you've got your probes connected across something and you're wiggling it about, unless it gets long enough to process, you won't have the bleep. So what I'm saying is a very, very simple continuity tester could be made with a battery, a buzzer, and a pair of probes. And all you have to do is get the right battery and probes, and away you go. Now, if you like audio, that's fine. But if you're working somewhere where there's other people about, they will very quickly get annoyed with you with all the bleeps. So why not replace that buzzer with a little bulb? Now, either an automotive bulb or a bicycle bulb, either 6-volt bicycle bulb or whatever, whatever size battery you're going to go. Put that in series with the battery and a pair of probes, and you've got a quick continuity tester. The beauty of that is you don't have to be looking at it, because it'll either bleep or it'll light up the area you're in very quickly without you having to keep checking whether it's working or not, as you probably would with a multimeter. So in fairness, very, very simple little tools. Now, when you're building these little Mickey Mouse devices, often you need probes. And what's the point in doing something really basic and then going to spend a fortune on a set of probes? Because often these sort of devices don't have high voltages on them. They're never going to have high voltage on them. So you just need to make it easy to use. Now, how many ballpoint pens do we throw away? Hundreds in your time. But when they stop working, they're very useful. Their plastic cases are very useful to act as probe shells. And what you can then do is either fit a copper nail, which would be better, and solder a wire onto a copper nail and embed it into the probe, or glue it into the probe, and then you've got a couple of nice probes for very, very cheap money. Doesn't have to be copper probes. They're nicer if you can got them. But if you've only got the normal nails, as long as you can solder a wire to it before you push the probe pointer into a pen body, that'll work just as well. So you can make test probes fairly easy for a lot of things. Now, one of the test probes I made up the other week, and equally you could do exactly the same as I'm talking here, but instead of using nails as a pointer, I wanted something very fine to do some very fine work, to which I got a couple of sewing needles and soldered wires to a pair of sewing needles. At the time, I didn't have a couple of spare ballpoint pen shells. So what I actually used there was I just put a bit of heat shrink over the joint so I could hold the connectors via the heatsink. And these needles, sewing needles, are very, very fine. So if you want to make a measurement on a chip that's got very, very fine legs, you can connect these to your voltmeter and make the relevant measurements. Now, as I say, you're not going to be measuring high voltages, and if you're stupid enough to go off and try and measure valve circuits with this type of probe, then you'll get a shock. But for the sort of stuff we do on up to 12 volts and that sort of thing, you shouldn't have a problem. In fact, most modern chips now are running at 5 volts or less predominantly anyway. So that's another little one. Now, next thing I was going to suggest is an LED tester. So you go, well, how do I test an LED? Well, if you're somebody who owns a digital voltmeter, you never get enough volts across the probes to turn an LED on. Because when you put it into diode test, you put about just over 1.5 volts on it. A red LED requires about 1.7 volts across it to make it light up. A green one's over 3 volts. So you're never going to test them properly. Now, a very, very, very easy tester is to take a 9-volt battery, a 2K2 resistor, and connect your probes to the earth side of the battery and the 2K2 resistor. Now, you can do that, and you'll light up most LEDs. But if you want to go a bit cleverer than that, and that's the basic circuit, if you want to go a bit cleverer than that, you can always put it in the box with connectors to connecting proper probes to it, and you can put one of these miniature LED voltmeters in across. So you power the voltmeter off the battery, but the sense wire you connect to the probe side of the 2K2 resistor. That way, when you put it across an LED, the voltmeter will tell you what voltage is required across the LED to make it work. Now, I've said do it with a 9-volt battery. If you're thinking of doing a lot of work where you've got LED arrays where there's more than one LED in the package and you need to put quite a bit of voltage across them, then you can always use a boost converter. And you can go up to about 30 volts with one of these 2K2 resistors. If you fed 9 volts into a boost converter, turn it up to about 29 volts, 30 volts, and you'll light pretty much any LED you're going to come across. And it'll also tell you, if you fitted the voltmeter, what the voltage across it is. You don't have to fit a voltmeter. You can use your multimeter to see what the voltage is across the LED when it lights up. Now, another useful thing in the shack is, I find, an audio tracer. Now, that effectively is 2 items connected together. The first is a little audio amplifier with a speaker. Now, these don't have to be expensive. Guys, there are little boards on the internet which are about 1/2 an inch wide by about 2 inches long, and they've got an LM386 on them. You can stick them into a box with a 9-volt battery and a little speaker, and this is the catcher. Don't use a 4-ohm speaker, use an 8-ohm because they go a little bit unstable if you use a 4-ohm speaker. You use an 8-ohm speaker and connect up the audio input to a socket. Now, in the middle of the board, or one end of the board, is a little preset control, usually a 10K pot. You take that off, you replace it with a 10K logarithmic pot with an on-off switch, and when you're fitting it into the case, and just wire the leads down to the board. Therefore, you've got a very quick audio amplifier for pretty much pennies that is portable and you can connect up to things. Next thing you do is you can then build the probe, and there are a number of these on the internet. You build an audio probe so that you can probe a circuit and see where the audio stops. And often these probes also have a demodulator in them for AM, so you could actually, if you're working on old radios, find it that way. There's another useful device that I've started playing with a bit more recently, and yeah, I've got a scope as well. That's not a problem, but sometimes you just want a quick and dirty check. Is the oscillator running? Yes, no. And you can do this with an RF probe. An RF probe is little more than a capacitor to block the DC coming in, a diode to rectify it, and a resistor. And what you then do is you feed this into a digital voltmeter on volts. And if you've got any voltage there, you know that your oscillator's running. And the ones that Heathkit built years ago, that's all they were. A resistor, a diode, and a capacitor. And you can measure to see if any oscillations there are up to about 100 meg. So I'm not saying it's going to give you accurate measurements. I'm not saying it'll tell you what frequency it is, but it will tell you where the oscillator is running. So often you want a quick and dirty, is that working? Yes, no, when you're trying to fault find something. So there's another option for you. Last one, and this is so simple that a lot of people don't do it. We all think that we all need these third-hand devices. You know, you've got to have this device to hold the PCB or whatever you're using while you're soldering. Must have one, mustn't you? No. Why not just use a bit of, in the UK we call it blue tack, but it's like a sticky putty thing that you can put up pictures on a wall and then take them down later. Get a ball of that, some of that, roll it into a ball, and you can stretch strips out on the table if you want to hold things, and it will hold PCBs, cables, plugs, all those sort of things. It'll hold it while you're soldering and you're not chasing it all over the desk. So, just a few ideas. I apologise for those who knew all these, but in some ways, things have got too difficult. You know, a simple continuity tester with a battery, a bulb, and a couple of probes is so simple, but it's so useful. And the clever device, the multimeter, often isn't as quick as the simple device that works much better. So, just a few ideas. Hopefully I haven't bored you too much with them. And I'm sure you can probably think up some others which you think are good ideas. I hope this was of use.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, everybody, I really hope you enjoyed our features episode. And as always, with these types of features, there's always something there for everybody. As I say, some interesting tips and tricks and things along the way. And most importantly, keeping things simple. We'd love to hear your feedback and obviously what you think about some of the things we covered and some of your suggestions and ideas. And you can get in contact with us the usual way. Go to the ICQ podcast webpage, click on the Contact Us button and drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. Now, talking about that, our friend and colleague Martin Butler M1MRB drops a line in relation to a news story we covered in a previous episode. And he said, we've talked about the AM removal of cars, citing the interference that electric vehicles create as the reason behind it. There's a follow-up that might be interesting where a bill has been passed that requires automators to maintain AM broadcast radio in their vehicles without a separate or additional payment fee or surcharge. So we'll pop that link on the show page so you can check that out from there. But interesting there that, as I say, there is I suppose a legal requirement now to maybe keep AM broadcast going into cars in the States, Dad.
Yeah, certainly is, son, and I think it's a good thing. I mean, you know, just because it's old technology doesn't mean to say that people don't use it. As I say, part of what I was saying about the KISS technology, everybody expects a microprocessor and about 52 chips to make something any good, whereas for years we've done quite well on AM. FM modulation is obviously a lot cleaner because it doesn't suffer interference as much or hardly at all. And you've got wider bandwidths up there on the higher VHF bands. But, you know, there's still valid stations, local stations that are very useful. And just because we all want to go electric cars doesn't mean to say that they can just do away with AM stations because the cars are so noisy. So that's a good thing, I think, Colin.
Yeah, certainly agree. Now, June is a really busy month for the ICQ podcast, and we start off on the 3rd of June with our next Digital Talk Group Day. And as you mentioned in the news in brief, we'll be also working with the very important call sign currently in the UK, GB23C. So we would advise you guys to check out the Digital Talk Group. Again, go to the podcast page, icqpodcast.com, and check out how to get involved in the Digital Talk Group. And we say we'd love to have you guys all along. But in the meantime, test to make sure, everything's working, etc., and chat to your fellow listeners and presenters, etc., by joining that talk group. And it'd be great to have you along, not only on that day, but obviously on the talk group, and chatting to everybody about the hobby, what you enjoy, etc. So please do check that out. And at the end of June as well, we'll be off to Friedrichshafen for our Ham Radio 2023. Our first time there, for a few years. And as I say, we'll be obviously working away from that side there. So, obviously a lot going on in June that we would, love to see and hear from you guys about what's going, etc. Now, with that in mind, obviously, we would like to ask you to consider the value that we bring you with these types of projects and solutions that we're doing, etc., for you. And we'd like you to do what our monthly subscription donors did this episode by going to, the donation page on the ICQ podcast website, where you can show your value for what we do and getting out and about, etc., by helping us out with our running costs. Everything you send our way, goes towards improving your show and paying our bills, etc. So, if we've given you some insight into something today, you've learned something from the show. If you can turn it into a financial figure for us and pop it our way, we'd be really greatly appreciated. And as I say, more importantly, it helps us out for our running costs, and also, as I say, from time to time, buy Mrs. B a new pack of chocolate biscuits or two. So do consider us, as I say, with our work fund there. So I say for now. Now, as always, we'd like to thank our contributors this episode. So we've got Dan, KB6 November Uniform, Caryn, KD2 Golf Uniform Tango, Edmund, Mike 0 Mike November Golf, and Ed, DD5 Lima Papa. Many thanks for taking part in our news roundtable. And say we really appreciate your efforts this episode, bringing the show together, along with a monthly subscription donors. Right, I think that just about covers everything, Dan. I'm just checking through the list. We've got the digital talk group down on the 3rd of June. We've got Friedrich Sharp at the end of June. I say we've thanked our very kind donors. I think the only thing left to do is thank the very important Mrs. B, I say, for supporting us, and I say keeping you well hydrated as you work through this podcast episode. And I say you can return the favour by making her a cup of tea, and hopefully, I say we've still got some treats in the biscuit tin for her.
Certainly will make your mum a cup of tea in a minute, yes, and you're dead right. We are extra busy, and there's a couple of others you didn't even mention, which I'll just drop very, very quickly. 2nd of June, I'm doing a talk for Crystal Palace Club on the digital talk group in South London. And the 8th of June, I'm in Kent, in Margate in Kent, doing the same talk. And I'm still waiting for confirmation on dates to do it for a club online in Barnstable in Devon. So that's without everything else. And I know we are trying to fit another interview in, and I'm running out of time. But yes, I'm looking forward to chatting to as many of you as possible. Certainly at free exam as well. But a long one, Colin. Now I'm going to shut up, go make your mum a cup of tea, and find her a chocolate biscuit.
At all. Well, as I say, guys, we'll bid you all 73s, and as I say, we look forward to catching up all again in a fortnight's time, or on the ICQ podcast digital talk group. So 73s all, and continue to enjoy the hobby.
Yeah, 73.